All right, we are here with the second topic, and man, this is the one that got me riled up, to be honest with you. I had to take some time. Yeah, as you can see, the light is on. The day has gone. You know, some time has passed since I recorded the first part for those who are watching on YouTube, so you can tell throughout the day. But I had to take that time to process my emotions, process my thoughts about this. Although what I'm going to say here is no different from my thoughts when I was, I guess, in a high emotional state. But I'm going to be able to say these things without, I guess, yelling and hopefully without prayfully without cursing. But as you can see from the title, I'm going to pose this question, and this is going to be an interesting one because I feel like a lot of folks are who are of the Christian faith, or may not be of the Christian faith, and still want to chime in. But I feel like this is one of those topics because it is a religious, I guess, debate, if you want to call it that. People are going to chime in and speak their piece about it. And well, I welcome them to do so. Be respectful about it, but people are going to be disrespectful if they choose to do so too, especially God's people. You know, we meaning may not meaning you or me, but we as Christians tend to love to tout about how we're God's people, but we are some of the most disrespectful beings on this planet. All right, that's for another discussion for another time. It's not only Christians who are disrespectful, it's other religious folks of other religious beliefs who are disrespectful. But I, being a Christian, I can only speak about, well, I can't, it's not that I can only speak about, because I could speak about the disrespect from other religions as well, other people from other faiths as well. But I want to speak about Christianity because I feel more comfortable doing so simply being a Christian. Can't speak about disrespectful Muslims or disrespectful Jewish folks or whatever. I'd rather have someone of that faith. It'd be great if I had someone of that faith to come on here, talk about that. Doesn't mean I won't do it, but I'm just saying, I think to some folk, or a lot of people out there, it would mean more if there was someone of said faith talking about said faith. In my opinion, that's what I think. At least I'm not sure. Some people might want to hear me talk about the other stuff, but as I was saying before, so you see the title. This debate or this question came from actually my church. Now, it wasn't a question that came from my church per se. It was a question that I asked because I'm the only person in church that actually asks questions, or at least ask questions that are not necessarily that can be seen as blasphemous, I guess, or questions that can seem as though, or someone can say that I am their bad faith questions. I'm just bringing the phone closer, not the microphone, but the phone closer to me. But these questions can be seen as bad faith or labeled, put it that way, as bad faith questions simply because they're not, for lack of better wording, kiss ass questions. You know, I can tell you right now, I am not moving in bad faith when I ask this question. Is not paying tithes a sin? I asked this question because I truly want to know. I truly want to know people's thoughts. Now, among doing this, I did some research just to answer my own question. Upon this research, I have three sources here on my phone that I took screenshots of quotes. I didn't take actual like links. I can share that, but I didn't read entire articles, right? Or at least I didn't screenshot and save the entire articles from where these quotes came from, right? Quote statements, what say you? So I have three screenshot quotes or statements on my phone right here, or this phone. All right, not the phone I'm using to record this audio, but this phone here. I also have a source from Chat GBT, or at least a quote from Chat GBT. Now you're like, did you really just ask the AI to do some research? Where did you have them? You're a cinnamon. Yeah, I'm a cinnamon or Cinnamon, but no. All right, so I went to ChatGPT because the question that I asked on ChatGPT, I looked all over on Google for, and I wasn't getting the answer. It kept taking me to chat room places like Reddit and what's the other one, Quora or Kira, whatever the other one, like these chat rooms where you have people on there. Now, I wanted to get my answers from actual sources, not people with personal biases. That's where I wanted to get my stuff from. I didn't go in these chat rooms to try to argue with people. I didn't want to hear what they thought. This is the Earnest Thoughts podcast, not the Reddit Room podcast or the Quora uh, Thoughts podcast. None of that. It's this is not the podcast for me going in Reddit and other chat rooms like that. And looking at their comments and basing my own opinion about their on basing my opinion on other people's comments. You know what I'm saying? I'd rather have them come on this show and share those thoughts instead of going on Reddit or Quora or wherever the hell else and say what they said on those chat spaces. So that's the reason why. All right. And ChatGPT is seems to be more reliable than some humans. Not all, but some. Blame yourself. But anyways, sorry. As I've stated before, I have two quotes. One is actually um like how can you say a translation of a verse in 2 Corinthians 9 and 7. It says, each of you should give what you have decided in your heart to give, not reluctantly or under compulsion. For God loves a cheerful giver. Now this is in the New Testament. I asked ChatGPT about the Old Testament simply because, again, as I've stated before, when I looked all over the internet and scoured rooms and well, I tried to avoid rooms, but it kept giving me all these chat rooms of people bringing up the Old Testament and stuff. I get it, people want to talk about this stuff, but I wanted actual links. But I scoured the internet, or at least Google, for the Old Testament, and all it kept doing was defining what it said and giving me actual quotes for what it said, but not necessarily answering my question: is it a sin? All it did was define what tithing is, or what tithing was in the Old Testament, what it meant to tithe within the Old Testament, and the New Testament stuff was saying the same thing too, but at least it went a little bit further. Now, my church, I feel as though they go by the Old Testament. I can't honestly say, to be honest with you, because I'm not no Bible. I don't know the Bible back and forth. It's just what I was gonna say Bible thumper. I'm not that, but I don't know the Bible back and forth. So I can't tell you if someone were to read a certain passage. Now, based on the language, the New Testament is a lot clearer and it's a lot more it's easier, or at least for me, it's easier to understand than the Old Testament. So how I would guess which interpretation of whatever is from either the New or Old Testament is basically on the wording. If the wording seems a lot like, I guess, modern day wording, then I'm assuming it's New Testament. When it sounds all convoluted and kind of confusion and weird, I say Old Testament. I'm not saying I guess correctly all the time. I'm not saying I've been put to the test to even guess whether it's old or new. But again, based on what I was looking and the quote that I have with the Old Testament, it seems very, very well. This quote is not confusing at all, but other quotes that I've seen within the Old Testament, again, when I was doing my research, just seemed very like it wasn't. necessarily clear. Now, I'm not saying the New Testament is 100% clear. It's a lot clearer, or at least for me, like I said, than the Old Testament. But with that being said, let me read this quote from the Old Testament about tithing. And this is the quote actually my pastor read to justify why we should tithe. Um, and when I say justify, I use that very loosely. I'm going to use the right term to guilt trip people who go to this church the reason to tithe. Now, I meant to say this at the beginning. I'm gonna say it now before I read the Old Testament quote. Why I came up with this discussion, because yeah, I said because of church, but or what, yeah, because of church, and this happened a couple weeks ago as well. This happened all A lot of this stuff happened a couple weeks ago when I was just unable to record these podcasts, or at least not at the magnitude that I wanted it to, right? Or do a lot of work, actually. I couldn't do much writing because I didn't have a laptop. But a lot of this stuff happened around that time, a couple weeks ago. And yeah, she was pretty much like, let me read the quote. Let me read the quote and I'll get into it. I know I'm all over the place. But the quote says this: Will a mere mortal rob God? Yet you rob me. But you ask, how are we robbing you? In tithes and offerings. You are under a curse, your whole nation, because you are robbing me. Bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house. Test me in this, says the Lord Almighty, and see if I will now throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that there will not be room enough to store it. This is in Malachi, I believe, verses 3, or chapter 3, verses 8 through 10. Um, Leviticus, is that what NIV stand for? Leviticus? For a non-Bible, for a non-Bible thumper, I did good there, right? But pretty much what that quote is saying is, um, hey, listen, if you don't pay your tithes, you're you're not going to get blessed. You are sinning and bad things are happening, going to happen to you. Now it's all up to interpretation. People are going to say that's blasphemy. You making Jesus sound like he was extorting folks. People can interpret it that way. That quote sounds pretty much extorting, if that's even a word. It sounds like an extortionist. Like, hey, nigga, pay your shit, and you still gonna have two broken legs by tomorrow morning. If you don't pay, if you don't get me what you owe me, the kneecaps gone, nigga. And I'm sorry, like I said. But no, I'm not saying that that's what was being said, but that sounds like, and like I said, the Old Testament, this is the words that they use sound. I've heard people say this about the Old Testament or just the Bible in general, but I think they're pretty much referring to the Old Testament. It sounds pretty daunting and pretty threatening, for lack of a better wording, if there is, another word that I can use. It sounds like it's pretty like harsh, like, you're not if you're not going to pay your tithes, that means you're robbing me. And if you rob me, bad things are going to happen to you. Now, the three quotes that I have here, and again, that's the quote that my pastor used. I don't care who sees this, if anybody, nobody from my church even knows about my podcast, and if they do, they don't pay attention because the people who know me don't support your boy. The people who don't know me, like y'all, y'all support me, so thank y'all. But you know what I'm saying, like, even if they do, it's one of those situations where it's like run up and say something. But this is the New Testament. This is what the New Testament has to say. Again, 2 Corinthians 9 and 7 says, each of you should give what you have decided in your heart to give, not reluctantly or under compulsion. For God loves a cheerful giver. Now, when I read that quote, I hear, if you want to give, but don't do it be out of some impulse nature or don't feel pressure to do so. But also, if you have the means to give, don't be reluctant in giving because now you're just being greedy. And you know God loves a cheerful giver. So do it with your heart, not out of fear, and definitely not out of greed. Do it with your heart. That's what I get when I read that quote. All right. Again, my interpretation. Matthew 23:23 and Luke 42 states, and I don't know if this is new. This says New and Old Testament. Seedtime.com. So this is a quote that I got from seedtime.com. They're claiming this is both in the New and Old Testament. This quote I'm about to read you right now. Matthew 23:23 and Luke 11:42 states, Jesus referred to tithing as something that should not be neglected. Woe, you teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You give a tenth of your spices, mint, dill, and cumin, but you have neglected the more important matters of the law: justice, mercy, and faithfulness. Now, out of all of the three, or at least I guess all of the four, this one was my favorite. Again, I get that sounds more like Old Testament to me, but I could be wrong. Like I said, I'm going based off of the language and all of that. I could be wrong, I could be right. But that one is my favorite when it comes to tithing. Number one, because not all the reasons, not just number one, but um what I get from that is Jesus saying tithing is much more than just giving money. He said the more you all think you're doing right simply because you're giving money. You're giving 10% money or your possession. So like spices, mint, like anything of valuable. You're giving 10% of that to the church. Anything of value, right? But you are doing this and still forgetting to be a person who is of just a merciful person and a faithful person. And in other words, people, your money don't make you or your possessions don't make you a better person. Your heart still has to belong to Christ in order for you to actually be following and be Christ-like. It don't matter how much money you give to the church. If you are not following with your heart, you're still not tithing right. You might think you're buying your place in heaven by giving him 10% of your land, 10% of your earnings, 10% of your possessions, and all this other stuff. But you're still a terrible person. And there's a lot of that. And I mean, a lot of those people in the church, you know? And that's why that was my favorite because it made me think a whole lot, not just people in my church, but people in churches in general, the Christian faith. We have one more quote that I'll get into, one more so of a passage. Um, it says here, Jesus was not discouraging the practice of giving. He was reminding religious leaders that giving was about more than just money. Giving to God was about a person's heart. It was one of the many ways a person could offer their lives in dedication and dedicate themselves to God. This is from the Shepherd AZ Church, Shepherd AZ dot church. So I'm guessing the uh AZ is Arizona, maybe a church in Arizona, Shepherd Church in Arizona. Anyone familiar with it? I don't know. But that's what they published on their website um about tithing, you know, that Jesus, and it goes along with the quote that I read before. Jesus wasn't condemning tithing. He didn't say I'm against you all giving me things. But there's other ways of giving tithing rather than just giving money and giving other material possessions. How about give with your heart? Now, I bring this up, like I said, I got my reasons for bringing this up, but I've been tithing at this church for as long as I've been going to this church, and it's been about 3 years now. It's about maybe 2, 3 years now, I want to say. I want to say maybe about, yeah, around 2, 3 years. Hasn't been, I guess that's not a long time to y'all. And it isn't a long time to me, but nonetheless, the amount of work, the amount of giving, and I'm not just talking monetarily, the amount of giving that I've done to this church, it feels like a lot. A lot of advancements that the church has gotten because of my giving heart and my giving nature. Only been there 3 years. You would think I was there for 30. That's as much at work and giving that I put in. One can say you bragging, you doing this, that, and the third. I'm talking my ish right now. I'm gonna be real. I'm talking my ish right now because folks need to be reminded. Like I said, whoever sees this see this, but folks need to be reminded, and I need to remind myself. And people out there who might relate to what I'm saying and what I'm talking about here, y'all need to be reminded too. Hence why I wanted to bring up this question, but I also wanted to bring up the various points. Now, ultimately, did I get my answer? Is not tithing a sin? I think it's not. At least the testaments don't agree. The Old Testament pretty much says yes, not tithing is a sin. You're robbing God, and the New Testament and apparently the Old Testament too, because again, the verse that I read felt where I believe it was Old Testament, even though it said it was in the Old and New. This is yet another thing that is not necessarily clear. It is up to interpretation. And of course, it really depends on who is saying what. Your pastor is going to, depending on how greedy they are. Yeah, I'm gonna use that word. And this is not for lack of better wording. No, that's the word that I want to use. Depending on how greedy your pastor is, they are either going to tell you tithing is or isn't a sin. And then because depending on how you are going to live your life either thinking their word is God's word, or, you're not going to seek the outside information. It's very ironic of my pastor, and I'm not going to say names, but it's very ironic of my pastor to just a couple weeks ago or so preach a message of us doing our homework and finding and not always going to the pastor for the answers to things that we want to know. It's very ironic for her to have that message, but then also have this attitude that her word is bond, that she got all the answers, that she's sway. She's got all the answers. You know what I'm saying? But in all seriousness, it's that's the Christian way. When pastors want to alleviate some type of stress and pressure on them, they tell you to go look for the answers yourself. When you do go and look for the answers yourself, and then you come up with your own interpretations and your own answers, or your own understanding, if they don't agree with your understanding, then you're doing wrong by not listening to them. But when I went to you for the answers, you told me to go to somebody, go look for myself. And now that I came back and I've told you what the answer is, now because you don't agree with the answer, it's a wrong answer. You see how this thing and this religious thing works? Now, people are going to be watching this, listening to this, and be like, Ernest, you know this so much. Why are you going to church? That's a great question. This is one of those situations. This video or this topic is going to be super long, and I got one more topic to talk about. If I were to add why I felt the need to go to a church, but this conversation here is going to branch off to many different conversations that, trust me, will be had in the future. Conversations that I'll either write about, talk about here in the podcast. You know what I'm saying? So don't you worry. Don't you worry. Whatever questions you might have for me in regards to my relationship with Christianity or my relationship with the church, if there even still is one in the future, all of that stuff will be answered in the future. You just wait and be patient. All right. Focus on it now. Right now, we're trying to focus on this aspect of, is tithing a sin or not? I got three no's and one yes. Here's my answer. If, or my understanding of it, right? If you just go to church and you just want prayer on prayer on prayer, right? You just want the prayer power because there is power in prayer. If you want the prayer power from everybody from the church, your pastor, the other churchgoers, everybody, right? But you give nothing back. And when I mean give nothing back, I mean you don't volunteer to you don't help out with nothing. You don't volunteer your time. You don't even give out your phone number for people to call you if they need someone to talk to, or need someone to pray with, or need someone to pray for them, or simply just need to vent, or they just need a cup of sugar. You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't do any of that. You just take, take, take. I think you're out of line. You're not in alignment with the Christian way. Now, I use that term because shout out to my girl, Lauren, or she goes by Lolo, or I forget what name she goes by on YouTube, and I shouldn't because I subscribe to her. But um she's a Christian as well, right? And she considers, or how she used the term. She said sin is just another word for you're out of alignment, right? So I'm using her terms when I say that you are out of alignment with Jesus Christ if you just go to your place of worship in any religion. Let me not, you're out of alignment if you just go to your place of worship and you all practice prayer as a means of, that's one of your practices, right? If you go there to your place of worship and all you do is take the energy that you get, take the prayers, take the energy, take the help from other people, but you don't necessarily give anything. And again, anything is much more than monetary gain. If you don't give anything back, I think that's a problem. Absolutely. In that essence, not tithing because you're not doing anything. You just take, take, take. That is a sin. If your church does what my church does, and we do food drives and giveaways, and we do catering and all this other stuff, if you just come there just to get a free meal, get just to get some free groceries and all this other stuff, but you're not giving it out, or you don't take the growth, because I know a lot of folks who will say, oh, I'm taking this, but I'm going to give it to a bunch of other people. You know what I'm saying? So they're not necessarily taking any of the food that we get. They're taking it and they're donating it out to people that they know who are in need of it. If you're not doing any of that, and again, you're just take, 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 absolutely, you're not tithing. You're not tithing at all. And that to me is sinful. And what I mean by that is out. You are not in alignment with what Jesus wants of his followers to do. But on the contrary, if you are somebody who gives, gives, gives to your church, gives, gives, gives to everybody else, simply because the bulk of your giving may not be monetarily, doesn't mean that you're not tithing. Again, the quote that I read you from What was it? Matthew and Luke. Yep, Matthew and Luke pretty much said, listen, if you're not a just person, you're not a merciful person, you're not a person who is faithful to me. I don't care how much money you're giving me. I don't care how much possessions you're giving me. You're still not in alignment with me. And this is Jesus speaking. Corinthians quote pretty much said, listen, there's more to tithing than just giving me money. What does your heart say? All right. I love me a cheerful giver. If you want to give me because you truly want to do so, I love that. But don't feel compelled to do so. You know? That's literally the interpretations from the quotes that I gave you. And again, the uh Old Testament will say, "Hey, listen, if you don't give me anything, I'm gonna break your legs. Bad things are gonna happen to you." Not to make light of the situation, not to make it sound like horrible or whatever, but what it's pretty much saying is again, if you do not pay your tithes, then you are robbing God. Old Testament. So, just like with everything, I guess, people are going to take which ones, and that's the thing about the Bible, any religious text, but the Bible, and again, speaking as a Christian, people are going to take what they feel benefits them and apply that to their life. I can't say that I haven't been guilty of that in the past. In regards to this, I'm going to say one can say you're doing that right now when you try to justify you not paying, tithing all the time with money. I tithe all the time, just not financially. All of the catering stuff I've been doing out when I told y'all when I was missing those weekends last week. Yeah, now granted, when I was having tech issues and injuries and thumb injuries, yeah, I was still doing stuff with it, doing a lot of work outside of podcasting. Would that be work for work? Couldn't do work for school because I didn't have a laptop, but also work for the church, catering and all this other stuff, customer service, like community outreach. I'm tithing all the time with my time. You can say that, oh, that's an easy cop out. Then you pay with money. But the quotes say it don't matter how much money you give. It don't matter how much possessions you give to the church. Give them your jewelry. Give them some 10% of your land or 10% of your taxes, 10% of your earnings for the week, 10% of your monthly earnings, 10% of, what you have in your home in general. If you're not giving that with your heart, if you're not giving from a place of love in general, it don't matter. It don't matter how much you give. It don't matter what is the item that you're giving, the material item you're giving. Your heart's not in it. You're out of alignment. People gonna get upset with it. Churches definitely gonna get upset with it. If anyone from my church see this or hear this, they are definitely probably gonna get upset with it. I don't care. This is how I feel. And I feel like I'm on my journey now, my religious and spiritual journey now, to where not that I all needed people for me to believe the things that I believe, but it was and I said I was going to expound on this later. I'll touch on it now, but I will expound on this in a future episode or so, right? It was to be connected to like faithed people. I won't say like minded, but like faithed people. And that was why I joined the church, to be connected with like faith and like spiritual, for the most part, or for some part, let me put it that way, people. Like faith in a whole sense. We're all Christians in this church. This is not multi-religious church or house of worship, um, or whatever. This is a Christian church. You know what I'm saying? Um, so it was to connect with like faith people. That's why I joined the church. It wasn't because, ooh, literally, that's why. Obviously, to connect with God, but I didn't need a church to connect with God. I had a God connection with God, and God continues to connect with me. God compelled me to do this. God continues. I thank God. Should have done this at the very beginning, but I thank God for giving me this platform, allowing me to continue to have a platform like what I do here on the podcast. But if you think that I'm gonna be one individual that's gonna, you know, I'm not gonna give up. I'd give up on people before I give up on God. I'll never give up on God. I will give up on his people though. And that's a conversation he and I will have to have. I will give up on a church and hold church within myself and wherever else I go. Or I simply just maybe find a new church if that is something that I would want to do. Because not every church is bad. But I will say this. I want to end off this topic by saying this. If you are a kind-hearted, giving person, because there are things that I've noticed about black churches. I can only speak on black now. I'm gonna say this. I can't. I'm not obligated to not speak on, or at least I'm not out of line when I speak on other religions. I'm just not 100% knowledgeable because I'm not of those religions. I am very, 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 very much qualified to talk about black churches. So here I go. One of the things I've noticed about black churches, they're all about service. They're all about, and what I mean by that is, yeah, they're all about they do community service, which is a great aspect of the black church. But they're all about service, meaning what can they get from you? What can they take from you? And depending on what they're getting and the type of individual they are you are, that service can either go underappreciated, not appreciated at all, to highly appreciated and highly overhyped simply because of either someone you might know, someone you have a connection with that they can get some service from, or something that you provide. Let's just say you play the drums at your church, right? Let's say or someone plays the drum, not you, right? Someone plays the drums at your church. That individual is valued for that, for playing the drums. You might be an individual like myself who not only is an active participant of the church, you know, connecting with the other people, but you pay your tithes, not just financially, but with your time, your sweat equity, as the term goes. You are when your church does things for the community, you are front and center out there with the community that's not necessarily your community, but nonetheless you're out there within a community, nonetheless servicing those people. You don't complain, you don't ask for a dime, you don't do none of that. Sweat equity, paying tithes with equity in your heart, and you do it because it's in your heart to do so. Number one, you're paying tithes. So don't let these MFers tell you you're not paying tithes because you worked for free for 9 hours a day, couple hours a day. You didn't get a dang dime, but they are upset at you because you didn't get paid to work. And because you didn't get paid to work, you may have taken work off. Your paycheck may have been light that week simply because you took the week off, or at least you took some time off. Your paycheck suffered, but your heart felt good for what you did that day. So you can't necessarily pay as much money when tithing, or if any at all, because you probably took the week off and didn't get paid for that work week. You know, whatever the case is, you still end up paying tithe. So that's number one. Don't let these people tell you you didn't not pay your tithe. You didn't pay a tithe if all you do, and I know people like this. Like I ain't naming names, but people in my church know there are folks like this who just go to church, get their prayers, and get out. You know what I'm saying? They don't do nothing. They don't nothing. They go, they get what they want to get, and they get out. Y'all know folks like that. I know folks like that. But y'all also know folks like myself who have done so much for the church, whether it be so much in so little time or so much for the church in general, whether they were there for 3 years or there for 30 or sometime in between. They've done so much for said church that it either goes unnoticed, unappreciated, not by everybody, because there are folks at the church and they know who they are. They let me know how much I'm appreciated all the time. There are a lot of stuff. Like I said, I've been there for 3 years. There's a lot of work that went in, and I mean physical work and also just other work as well, outside of just that physical labor for the church or physical work for the church, because all of it was still physical labor spent by me. But, you know, there are some things that happen for the church, good things that happen for the church because of me. And again, only been there 3 years. There are folks who notice that. But then there are folks who will say, well, it's a sin if you don't pay your tithes. I've been paying my tithes ever since I started going to that, even prior to going to that, started going to that church. I'll give you another story. These about me, so it's true that I told you why I started going to church, but I can tell you why I started, how, not why I started going to this church, but how I got started with this church. And again, we almost getting up to 50 minutes. It's about 40 some minutes, so I'm gonna end it there, right? I literally saw a message from this was a I don't even old associate. I won't even call them a friend because I really didn't like this person like that. But nonetheless, it was an old associate of mine who used to go to that church. They put on Facebook that they were doing the church was doing a food drive. This is around Thanksgiving, again, 3 years ago, right? 2021. Around that time, they were doing a Thanksgiving food drive and that they really needed volunteers. I saw it. I said, I messaged the person and said, hey, how can I get involved? I didn't want anything. Now they gave me food, they gave me thanks and all this stuff, but I literally just saw the message just scrolling on Facebook. Now, it was God who provided that for me, of course, but I can tell you I wasn't seeking anything. I was literally just on Facebook scrolling, saw the message, messaged them, saw the status, messaged them, said, "Hey, how can I get involved? Where's the address? What time should I be there?" Literally, there three questions. Where's that? No, what can I do? Where is that? Give me the time. I'm there. Showed up about an hour late, but nonetheless, I showed up there and the food still wasn't there. So I got there before the food, but I showed up an hour later than what the time was. But nonetheless, it was my first time traveling to this new local. One, it's in a different city. My church is not in the city that I reside in now. It's in a different city. Number two, it was a totally different location than I've ever been. So my first time going anywhere, I'm always late. So it's just what it is. But that's what it was. At least an hour late. Or at most an hour late. We put it that way. Not very least. At least it's probably like 15 minutes. But you know, yeah, either or. I showed up. The truck came in, bunch of food. It was me, the driver, and probably like a couple other volunteers. Just four guys though, doing the work. Ever since that day, I've been doing the turkey drives. Ever since that day, I've been doing the other stuff, other catering stuff. Other members of the church will come and contact me and say, "Hey, I've seen you work this thing. I'm doing this, doing that, doing that. I know you do catering thing as well. How about you? I'm doing this event here. I need your help here." Out of all of the work that I've done, whether it was catering, whether it was helping moving things, whether it was like I was saying a couple weeks ago, there was a Black History Month thing that the pastor wanted to do. and she needed help setting up the decorations in church and setting up everything, stage. I was doing that. Didn't get paid for that. I didn't get paid for the turkey, the first turkey drive, my second turkey drive, my third turkey drive, and this year will be my fourth turkey drive, and I'm pretty sure I won't get paid for that. One event that I've ever did at the church, or for someone of the church, and it wasn't even a church event. It was for someone that sometimes go to the church. Her son holds these basketball events. It was a catering event that I did last summer. That was the only thing that I've ever gotten paid for. The only thing. There are certain, there's grandmas here and there when I help them with their, again, when we're doing food drives and stuff, and I help them carry their stuff to their car and I put it in their car and I'm loading up their food for them. And, they'll hand me $1 here and there. But that always goes back to the church. I've always saved those dollars and was like, put it back in the collection plate. You know what I'm saying? So if you're like, you didn't give 10% of that, I gave the whole dollar. 10% of that dollar would be a dime. You really want me to put a dime in that collection plate? Y'all would have really been pissed off now, wouldn't you? Anyway, so I think it would be a dime, right? Anyways, like I said, there's a bunch of conversations that can branch that is like in my mind right now that can branch from this one question. But to just reiterate, and then I swear I'm going to get off of this topic and get into the last topic. It is not a sin to not pay tithes monetarily. There are other ways of paying tithes. And if your pastor or people at your church are telling you there's only one way of paying tithes, you already know, like I said, it's all about greed. It's all about greed. It's all about just getting your money. Because what you do for the church when you help out, again, I do think it's a problem, and this is a problem inside and outside of church. I do think it's a problem when people just go to folks and don't offer any type of help to anybody, but they take from everybody. That's a problem. That is a problem. Whether you're religious or not, that is not godlike. Because God wasn't one to go around and take. God gave from his heart. So the nerve of any human being to tell you who gives from your heart that you're doing God a disservice because you're not giving from your wallet, or you're not giving from your wallet as much as you're giving from your heart. That's crazy. That's crazy, for lack of better wording. So yeah, we're gonna end it right there. Like I said, a bunch of other conversations that stem from this. Once I get my thoughts down, I will talk about that in the future. But we'll get into another break, commercial break, and then we'll get into the final topic. Stay tuned.